Welcome to the Off the Charts Football Podcast. I'm Matt Manocherian, former NFL scout and currently of Sports Info Solutions, joined this time by Nate Cooper, also of Sports Info Solutions, the guy who headed up all of our scouting department for our SIS Football Rookie Handbook, which is coming out very, very soon. It should be shipping before you know it. Pre-orders are available now on Amazon and on actasports.com. You can get free shipping. So, Nate, we're pumped to have you on.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate you having me.
Aaron won't be with us this week, but he'll be on back and forth throughout the offseason, and we'll be supplementing the usual programming with different characters from over here at SIS and from around the NFL and college football analysis community. But today we are here to talk about the NFL draft. We are here to dive into the process of what went into this book. And we got to start off right at the very beginning. I should mention we got producer Justin here with us. But Nate, take us right back to the beginning because you've actually been putting together your own draft preview books for the past few years. And that's how this idea all got started. So tell us about that.
Yeah, everyone that knows me knows I'm a big NFL draft guy. For 10, 15 years now, I put together my own information, put together binders of information every year. These last couple of years, I finally, put them into books. And as I've shown you for the past couple of years, I have a book on my own, wanted to do something with the company. And, we were able to come through and get this going for the company itself.
It's kind of been an amazing process because Nate was doing this on his own. He was putting together these really professional looking books. Your dad is in the publishing business. Is that right?
Printing business.
Printing business. So he was able to put together these really awesome looking books. But since we put together this whole NFL thing here a few years ago and we've been building this up, one of our goals looking across at the baseball guys and seeing their Bill James handbook was to get something kind of real and company behind it and go kind of all out. And we had the opportunity to put that together this year. And so the concept of the rookie handbook is essentially a combination of scouting reports, and not just any scouting reports, but scouting reports that are based on NFL scouting practices. So for listeners that don't know, I spent 5 years in 2 NFL front offices with the New Orleans Saints and with the Cleveland Browns, Mike Lombardi's time there. So I got to learn kind of the old school grade-based scouting methods that the Saints were using at the time, and then also the very new school sort of Patriots way methods that Mike Lombardi helped create, honestly, with Bill Belichick back in the 90s. Through combining these 2 different grading scales, we've actually been able to, at SIS, in addition to the charting operation that we have here, where we're recording objective information about every NFL and every college football play. We cover all 130 NCAA FBS teams. And in doing all that, we've been able to add in this awesome scouting element. And included in that has been what we call Scout School. So I think a lot of people know about the Scouting Academy. Dan Hatman runs an awesome program. We actually get some of our guys that come out of the Scouting Academy that make great scouts here. But what we do is every Wednesday night throughout the season, when we kind of finish all of our charting operation for the week, and we're having our weekend really comes on Thursday and Friday before the college football starts up again on Saturday. We have a meeting where we get together, we watch players together, we discuss what these 2 different franchises that I work for, what the different traits that we looked at were, and pretty much everything that I learned from the scouting process back in the day. And we try to teach that to the guys. And over the last 2 years, Nate's been a huge part of that process. And I think with the book, kind of one thing that I wish we could explain to everybody in greater detail, we try to at the beginning of there, is our grading scale and how much time we spend, because we're doing subjective grading here. This is trait-based grading. This isn't what we're known for at Sports Info Solutions with the analytics really and the objective stuff that we're recording. So Nate, can you talk about the process that we went through, getting guys on the same scale? First of all, our 1 through 9 grading scale and what that means, and then how we use those to come to our final grades on each of the players.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we go through the grades, 1 through 9 is all, each grade is 1 word. So you have 6 as a good. So whenever we go through and we really determine what are good traits and good players, we start off with that 6. When we go higher than that, we're talking about very good, excellent. And when we go below that, we're looking at below average, things like that. So that way, whenever we write our reports, everything flows. So whenever someone says he has good arm strength, we know he has 6 arm strength. So whenever we go through different traits, everyone talks in the same language. and it's just easier to get on the same page with everyone in the room.
So in my experience, this is something that good scouting departments do, is that they get on the same page so that when we rate a quarterback's arm strength as a 6, we all know what we're talking about. When we say 7, we all know what we're talking about. Yes, from time to time, will two guys see the same player and disagree if it's a 5 or a 6? Of course. But we try to get on the same page so that we all know we're not arguing between a 7 and a 6 or a 4 and a 5. We know that at least we're all in the same area code. Now, we've got to be much more accurate than that when it comes to defining what a pressure is, for example, which is a whole different task that we do. We do a lot of things to try to get at the core of that issue. But here it's about getting on the same page with our eyes. And then also, two guys are going to see player. They're not going to see all the same games. They're not going to see all the same quality of competition. And honestly, scouting's not perfect. The way you're feeling on a certain day can affect the way that you end up writing a player. You might look back at the same player a month ago and think, oh, man, I was driving through the rain that day in Toledo and I was having an awful time. And it's important that we kind of gather all of these grades and then we go through a process just like NFL teams do. So, Nate, you and John Todd, you guys ran the whole process. But talk about how you guys organized kind of the creation of the player pool and then narrowing that down into who was going to get cross-checked, how the cross-checks were going to get assigned. How did you guys figure that whole process out?
So obviously, if you look online, you can find any sorts of rankings of different positions and different players. We were gathering through all these different rankings. Look at these top 100. Look at these top 100. Come through. Make sure everybody's on the list. We wanted to have everyone on the list. If we had more, that was fine. The more, the better at this point. We basically had 3 stipulations. We wanted to make sure we had all the top seniors on the list. We wanted to have every single declared underclassman, and then we wanted all the Senior Bowl guys. So this whole list was going to take all of those up. That ended up being over 400 players. All over 400 players. I think we had about 408 that had scouting reports written. And then it came down to, we took about the best 254 or so that made the book. So, we went through, made sure all the players were on there, and then we let the scouts do the work.
Yeah, that's a key aspect. There you see, 253, 254 reports in the book, just over 250 there. But there were hundreds more reports that were actually written that the players didn't make the cut. And it's a real process of narrowing down. So the quality that we get in those top 250, it's not like we gave every report that we wrote this year. And in fact, we're combining reports on a lot of those players in a lot of cases as we're doing our cross checks and getting our different position stacks sorted out. You guys did such an awesome job with that. I know they put my name on the front of the book, but I'd be the first one to tell you it should say Nate Cooper. It should say John Todd on the front there. And also Brian Reef. Nobody did more work than him on this book in terms of designing all the different pages and getting it so that when you have the Football Rookie Handbook, you're literally looking at side by side. You've got your player evaluation on the left. You've got all of the different run game, pass game evaluations broken down. And then on your right there, you've got all your critical factors written out, and then all the advanced scouting that we added that we spent a ton of time with the R&D team getting the very best stats that we could for college football into the book. Anything else that you wanted to touch on in terms of the process before we get into some of these players? Just in case, before we lose anybody with all the process talk, we're going to be getting into quarterbacks. Obviously, we got to talk quarterbacks, and we're going to be getting into the defensive line prospects in this draft, the deepest position of the draft for sure.
Yeah, just, me and John, we worked really hard on this the last couple of months. This really all, started to take shape around October. And all the credit goes to our video scouts. These guys helped us out a ton, writing over 400 reports, getting them all in on a timely manner, allowing us to do the work that we needed to do, and really make this book what it is.
Yeah. And I'll take a quick moment to just kind of plug the video scouts as well, because those guys do amazing jobs. We've had former video scouts coming through who, like Nate Cooper, who are moving up the ladder at SIS rather quickly. But also we have guys that are in the NFL, that are with college teams, that have gone into high school coaching, that are writing in different media, NFL Network. So we're spreading our wings, not just sharing our data with all of our different clients that are doing great things like Aaron Schatz and Warren Sharp. But on top of that, we're also seeing these video scouts that really come in here and they work their tails off and they get trained. They're watching thousands of hours of football. Nobody watches more football than these guys, and they're getting the highest level of training that they can in terms of what the teams are actually looking for, what the teams are using. And now we've added this element this year of this scouting report process, and where you can really kind of get a really good education on how to write scouting reports, what to look for when you're watching film. And it's a really good kind of graduate degree for anybody that is either playing college football or works in college football or is trying to get into a start in the football industry. This is the best graduate course that you could have. So we will be taking applications already for August, our new class of video scouts that'll come in. We'll start taking applications in about a month for that. So look out for that. Teamwork Online and on our website, sportsinfosolutions.com. All right, so let's talk about the quarterback class first. Let's talk about the class as a whole. What do we need to know overall about this class?
I think if you look at the class, it shows a lot of arm talent. There's a lot of strong arms in this class. There's a lot of guys that really struggle with their footwork. And I think if you look at it as a whole, I mean, maybe this is something that you can allude to a little bit better, but I think college offenses are run so differently than the NFL right now that it's tough to come in and really transition straight from college to the NFL. So I think that might have something to do with why it's tough to actually scout some of these positions going into the NFL.
So I'm with you. That's definitely been a challenge, and that's been a challenge for the better part of like 10 years now with all the spread offenses that have come in. But I actually think that now that the NFL seems like it's starting to finally adapt a little bit and do some of these things that are kind of patently more efficient that college football is doing, I actually think, if we look at the guys that came out this past year, there were 5 guys that were pretty pro-ready. Jury's still out on a bunch of those guys. You could say maybe Rosen wasn't ready, maybe Lamar Jackson wasn't ready. But, I mean, all things considered, you saw Baker Mayfield come in and set the rookie touchdown record. Josh Allen played better than a lot of people expected him to play. And I think a lot of that had to do with the Bills, the Ravens, the Browns, these teams adapting their offenses to what these quarterbacks can do and what they're kind of used to doing. So I wonder if the pendulum's swinging back in the other direction towards we can actually look at what these guys are doing in college football as quarterbacks and understand what they're going to be. And, man, that brings up the conversation about Kyler Murray that we're going to get into in a minute because I think that's pretty much the main question with him. But interesting that you said arm talent because I see what you're saying there. Haskins, certainly a guy with arm talent. Murray, definitely there. Daniel Jones has a really strong arm. He kind of looks the part when you see him on the hoof. So you see the arm talent there. Will Grier, another guy who I think can rip it pretty well. So I see what you're saying in terms of the arm talent. But for me, I've never been much of a sucker for arm talent. I'm an accuracy guy. I'm a processing guy. I'm a leadership guy. Those are our critical factors that we talk about with quarterbacks. And I'm a believer that there's a reason for it. And that's why I don't believe that this is a very strong class overall. Is that fair to say that we don't see sort of nothing close to what we saw last year as a class? Maybe we'll see some guys emerge and be better than we expect, but there's not really the sort of top level talent this year that we've seen in years past, correct?
Yeah, I think I agree. If you just look at our handbook, Haskins and Murray are our top 2 graded guys, and they're well above the rest. Everyone else is pretty much that mid-tier and below, which I think is kind of the epitome of this class.
Let's get into the guys. So Haskins and Murray, we have them both graded at a 6.8. So just to kind of calibrate everybody, a high 6s grade, kind of like in the 6.5 to 6.9 range. These are your solid starters to very, very good starters. 7.0 and above, you're really talking about your Pro Bowl difference-making level players. Haskins and Murray come in at a 6.8 for us, which is a very good starting grade. But it's certainly a tier behind where I think we had some guys rated last year, like your Mayfields of the world. And I think we have 2 guys that got there pretty differently. I know you did some cross-checking on both of these players. Dwayne Haskins, a guy that kind of checks more of the boxes than Murray does, but Murray, a guy that I think when you really start to think about, okay, how can we win with this quarterback, there's some exciting stuff there to think about with Murray. When you think about there are some traits where, oh, God, we got to stay away, but there are some traits where, man, this guy's special.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Murray, he's the explosive guy. He's the playmaker. He can do anything. He can throw the ball. He can run. He extends plays. Obviously, the big concern is his height. Whenever we talk about quarterback height, it's usually they're just a tick under 6 feet. With Murray, we're talking about 5'10". We're talking a couple inches below that.
We'll find out for sure soon enough at the draft.
Absolutely. And with his height, he doesn't actually get a lot of passes batted down, which is something that you would think as well. He has good footwork in the pocket. Is accurate all across the field, has the arm strength that we were talking about. And most running quarterbacks, they don't really know how to slide. Kyler Murray's a baseball player. This guy knows how to slide, so he can preserve his body and get the use out of it.
I always think sometimes you hear about guys that played quarterback and then you see them try to slide and you're like, are you sure that he played baseball? Like, because I don't think Ryan Tannehill ever, like, he's supposed to be an athlete. He was also a wide receiver. He played all kinds of sports growing up. That guy can't slide at all. Every time he slides, I think he's going to get stuck in the turf. But Murray, you really see it. And you see that, at least on film, he seems to have a sense of when he needs to get down and when he needs to get out of the way. So that's encouraging. What I want to talk about with Murray is kind of player comparisons and what I think he is as a player. Because last year we heard Baker Mayfield compared a lot to Russell Wilson. But I think that this comp is much more accurate of Kyler Murray to Russell Wilson. I don't think the Baker comp was ever good. So I've also heard Michael Vick and Drew Brees thrown out as names that people compared to Kyler Murray. And it goes to the point that those guys are pretty different. So what are we talking about when we're saying this guy's Mike Vick and this guy's Drew Brees at the same time? Because those are about as different as quarterbacks as you can get. So, yes, he's fast, so we say Mike Vick. And, yes, he's short, so we say Brees. And he kind of plays like a baseball player, so we say Brees. But those are traits that those guys have in common. But like last year when I said if Baker was going to succeed, it would look more like Brees than Russell Wilson. I think that if Murray's going to succeed, it's going to look much more like Russell Wilson than it will Drew Brees, Mike Vick, Lamar Jackson, or anybody else. I think the difference between Murray and somebody like Jackson, or even more so somebody like Josh Allen or Cam Newton, is that even though these guys are all mobile, Murray is not somebody who I think you want to run a lot of design quarterbacks run with. So you're talking about something really qualitatively different about the way that you're going to use these quarterbacks. We saw the way Lamar Jackson came in. We saw the way Josh Allen came in. That is not going to be the plan with Kyler Murray. At least it shouldn't be the plan with Kyler Murray because a player this size is just going to be too fragile. It's a tool in the toolbox, and it's going to come out spectacularly, I think. But I think his upside looks much more similar to Russell Wilson, and I think his floor looks much more like Pat White than any of these other guys that we've mentioned. Now, let's go back to Pat White for those that don't remember. He was a very productive passer and runner at West Virginia, ridiculous athlete he also had professional baseball upside and a very similar body type to Kyler Murray as far as I can tell. Pat White entered the league in 2009 when the Dolphins were still trying to fit him into a wildcat role. Like we were saying before, this was a different league back then. And White's career ended memorably for everybody except him because he got knocked out. And at that point, it seemed, this guy isn't big enough, strong enough to be able to handle this position. This was a bad idea. It's kind of the way everybody walked away from that experiment. That said, this is a different league now. We're playing much more game that's much more like college football than it is the old school NFL that we knew. We've even got different rules now about how you can hit quarterbacks and how they're protected. So I think we're understanding how to use these guys better. We're having rules that are more conducive to using somebody like Kyler Murray. So even though Mickey Loomis would tell me all the time, we don't want to be a team full of exceptions, I think that Kyler Murray, there's a reason to think that he could have a very different path than Pat White, despite their athletic similarities. So I think, even though in the book we have Haskins above Murray, we have them at the same grade, we have Haskins above Murray. For me, I'm a Kyler Murray guy above Haskins. If I was going to kind of roll the dice on one of these quarterbacks this year, I think I would be more likely to want to roll the dice on Kyler Murray if the fit was right. The floor, like I said, I think it's Pat White. I think it's clear. But the ceiling, I think, is Russell Wilson. I don't think that this is going to be Drew Brees. I don't think that this is going to be Mike Vick. I think that the upside is the playmaking ability of Russell Wilson, but built around the combination of the on-schedule with the off-schedule stuff. Just some stats on Kyler Murray before we get out of here. He led the quarterbacks across the country in everything and by a large margin. Pass yards per attempt at 11.6. He was 2 yards better than anybody else. On target percentage, independent quarterback rating, which takes out dropped interceptions, things like that, and recalibrates the old quarterback rating formula. He led everybody in that by double digits. Expected points added per drop back, rushing expected points added. Even in total expected points added, he led everybody by almost 100 points. Just a different level of offense that we saw on the field from Kyler Murray this year. Now, Tua is the only guy that I think you could actually put their numbers side by side and have it look reasonable, but he's not available in this draft. All right, that's my soliloquy on Kyler Murray. I think I'm on the record saying what I like about him. You've got Haskins above Murray. What is the case for Haskins?
I think with Haskins, if you look at his season, he only has the 1 year of experience. But if you look from beginning to end, he improved greatly throughout the entire season. He has the accuracy to hit his receivers in stride, throws a lot off platform. And whenever he does that, sometimes he does it to himself because his base doesn't reset So one thing I'm a little worried about with him is he kind of throws like Cam Newton. And if any of you have seen Cam Newton throw, he throws all upper body.
High balls.
Doesn't follow through.
I got to cut everybody off and let them know you're a former quarterback. So Nate knows what he's talking about when it comes to either quarterback play or quarterback injuries. He's got a lot of experience on the surgery front too.
Absolutely. One thing I'm worried about with Haskins is if he's the same as Cam Newton, you're going to see a lot of ball sail on him. You're going to have some shoulder concerns. But I think if he comes together and really gets on schedule, if a team can get him on schedule, because he plays a lot off schedule right now, if the team can come in and get him going, get him where he needs to be footwork wise and everything, I think he can be one of the top guys in this class.
70% completions, 50 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. The numbers are clearly really good. Obviously, he was playing for a good team. I think a lot of people would be surprised to learn that his rush EPA was negative this year. This is not a runner at all. This is definitely a pocket passer that we're talking about here. For me, it's going to come down to the decision-making, the processing ability. We graded that as a 7 in the book. That's a very good grade. That puts him in the upper tier of NFL quarterbacks, theoretically. Is that a trait that we think, is going to be a calling card for him? Because I think for me, that's going to be the make or break thing for him, is his ability to process kind of the on-schedule stuff, like you're saying. Because when it's off schedule, I think we know what we're going to see. And in terms of arm talent and the ability to actually throw the football, I don't think there are big question marks.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if he can come in, I think he has the mental capacity to be able to take stuff in, learn the playbook, and make the decisions that he needs to make at the next level. And like you said, on schedule and off schedule, he showed a lot more off schedule than he probably needed to. But like I said, if he comes in, a team works with him, I think he's gonna show a lot of people what he can do.
Right. So as you mentioned before, we have those top 2 guys in our quarterback ratings, and then there's a pretty big drop off before we get to the other guys. In that whole second tier group, we have names like Ryan Finley, Will Grier, Daniel Jones, Drew Lock, Gardner Minshew. Can you talk about? I think you wrote up the reports on Ryan Finley and Gardner Minshew. What was it about those guys that you liked, that you didn't like? What do you think will make the difference? If these guys can actually get it done, or it's going to hold them back.
Yeah, I liked Finley a little bit. He struggled a little bit down at the Senior Bowl, which it seemed like all the quarterbacks did. He's a little bit of a lanky quarterback, but he has the size, has a little bit of footwork issues like we talked about earlier, doesn't really take drops out of center, doesn't always follow through on his passes, likes to guide the ball instead of really throw the ball, so he gets a little bit off with his accuracy every once in a while. But he has the arm strength to make all the throws with anticipation, throws off platform, has some things that really you look for at the NFL level. In terms of Gardner Minshew, I've been kind of a Minshew guy all year. He's a leader on and off the field. If you ask me, he was probably the most consistent quarterback down at the Senior Bowl. Throws with anticipation, reads the field, which you don't really see. It's not really the profile of most air raid quarterbacks. And for me, his quick and compact release and kind of a gamer style reminded me of Baker Mayfield. So no, I'm not saying he's Baker. He's not.
Say big praise there.
He's not a first round guy, but just the way he plays, and if you watch his playing style, it'll remind you of Baker a little bit.
So what holds Gardner Minshew back? If the good things are Baker, what are the bad things about his game?
Obviously, you want to see more accuracy from him. Working in an air raid offense.
That's tough to say. We want to see more accuracy,
exactly,
especially when you're leaving the air raid.
Yep.
I don't see a lot of people get more accurate when they leave the air raid.
No, you want to see more accuracy, especially short to mid range of the field. He can throw the ball down the field a little bit, but you just want to see a little bit more from him all across the field. Obviously, there's a little bit of a size concern. He gets a lot of passes batted down. Unlike, it's kind of weird, he's even a few inches taller than Kyler and has more passes batted. But I think there's some things that you can work with a little bit, but I think he could come into the league and really be a solid backup.
Guy that I wrote up for the book at the quarterback position was Will Grier, the West Virginia quarterback. And for Will Grier, I actually really like this player. I'd spent a lot of time kind of being a Duke alum watching Daniel Jones, and I was happy that somebody else wrote up the report on him, because for years as just kind of a Duke fan, I never reached the point where I trusted him and I wanted the ball in his hands. And I never got the sense that really, that as much as Cutcliffe seems to say nice things about him, that he really ever felt that comfortable with it either. And so I would be nervous for that reason, just to think about him in terms of, You want difference makers in college to become difference makers in the pro. If I was going to take a shot at one of these guys, it might be Will Grier. Will Grier is really interesting to me because I think he's got really good arm talent. I think that he can throw the ball with accuracy all over the field. He throws the ball deep accuracy. He throws the ball with short accuracy. I was on the fence between a good and a very good grade for him accuracy-wise. There were some games where it was a little bit inconsistent for me. But you talk about a guy with the ability to drop dimes. Will Grier can do that. Now, statistically, he also was awesome. Second in yards per attempt behind Kyler Murray. Also second in IQR and total expected points added. Those are really important stats that we look at for how guys project to the pros, because these are things that the quarterback, in IQR's case, it's something that the quarterback has a lot of control over. And in terms of expected points added, this is your ability to create offense. This is your ability to create points, literally. So we're looking at those skills as really important things when we do our evaluations. What is the knock on him? If he's so productive, he's does all this. I'm not pumped about the offense that he came out of. I think he has a lot of kind of easy production that comes out of it, and that's where you see some inflation of his numbers. You could give the same criticism to Kyler Murray for sure. So I would still say that his production is a positive in his game. But from a decision-making standpoint, I think this guy is a pre-diagnoser. I think that he makes his reads pre-snap, and if he gets the look that he thinks he's going to get post-snap, then he's fine. He's on rhythm. He's on target. He's going to get the ball out on his first or second read, and he'll be good to go. If the first or second read isn't there, and I'm talking easy second reads, there's not really a third read with this guy. He'll hang back there, and he'll look around, but I get the sense that if you can confuse him at the snap, if the pre-snap read is different than the post-snap read, I think he has a really hard time processing what's going on the back end. And I think you see him make some kind of questionable decisions as a result and end up having to rely on his excellent arm and accuracy to make up for what I think is it's good. It's processing that's adequate. It's sufficient processing pre-snap, which is part of the battle. I think Chase Daniel is one guy who I think processes pre-snap really well and gets 99% of the information he needs there, but he's a backup quarterback. I think that Jared Goff in the Super Bowl is a performance that would make me a little bit queasy about Will Grier if I'm thinking about him taking me to the promised land. Other thing with him is when it was the really tough situations, when they put the ball in his hands and they really needed him to make plays this year, they came up short a few times. And when I'm drafting a quarterback very, very high, if I was really considering him as a first-round player, I would want somebody that showed the ability to put his team on the back and win games. And we saw an okay ability to do that. We saw that in some exposures, but it wasn't there consistently enough for me to say where at times I saw the arm talent and I said, this is a guy, I want to give this guy a good grade. I like this guy. I think he's got a chance. I ended up having to kind of get into that middling sort of grade of quality backup to kind of upside starter, but not necessarily there with all the traits right now. It came down to wanting to see more in those clutch situations and in terms of processing post-snap what was going on. I still felt like we came out low. I came out low on him. I feel like I'm harder on guys than most of the video scouts were. Yes. You guys agree with that?
I could say that a little bit. Yeah, it seems like guys were grading a little bit higher, which is the reason that we go through all these cross-checks and everything. So, yeah, I could say that a little bit.
That's pretty good. So I created this scouting system that we all adapted to, and then eventually I ended up being off and needed to be one of the guys that was recalibrated for. So it shows you what a good job I'm doing. I think there was one more quarterback that we wanted to mention, and I think this one's all producer Justin's.
Yeah, Tyree Jackson from Buffalo. I saw a lot of him this year. I did 3 Buffalo games and then watched the conference championship game pretty closely. I've said around the office before, I had the same feelings watching Tyree Jackson this year that I did watching Josh Allen last year. The good tape is put you on the edge of your seat. Wow, how did he do that? And the bad tape is just shake your head and, man, what was he thinking? But he was super fun to watch. And I think if he got in a great situation in the NFL, I think he could have a future. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think I agree with you. There's a lot of stuff that I saw, like whenever the first game that I watched of him was against Temple this year, and I thought the same thing. I thought Josh Allen, the strong arm, the accuracy issues here and there, but that was the first thing that I thought of. But I think the accuracy concerns are very concerning. He has a bit of a wind-up release, and his footwork and poise aren't the greatest. So he has a lot of work to overcome. But I think he could be a guy that comes into the league and really sits behind a guy and learns for a couple of years.
I haven't studied this player, so I should be careful with what I say here because I don't like to comment on guys that I haven't specifically sat down and watched several games of film on. However, in my scouting career, I've written up at least a couple of guys that were quarterbacks in college as tight ends, included in them Logan Thomas from Virginia Tech, who's now playing tight end, Marquise Gray from Minnesota, who I think came into the league as a tight end. I haven't watched this player a ton. I don't feel comfortable commenting on him. It wouldn't shock me if there were some scouts around the league that were writing this player up in a similar way. And also, this is a different NFL. This could be a package quarterback now. We saw what the Saints did last year with, help me with the name, Taysom Hill.
Yep.
Looking at the Taysom Hill type and looking at kind of the upside for those sorts of players and how they can fit into the offense and be a good Swiss Army knife. Now, Taysom Hill clearly learned a lot of different positions very quickly this year, which is a skill that we shouldn't just assume that any player is going to have. But there could be a role for a player like this. Certainly, there are traits that he has that get you excited. I get afraid when I see accuracy numbers like what we found on him this year. An on-target percentage of 65%. That's tough. Just 71% catchable passes. So we need to see better numbers there. All right. Let's move forward and switch to the other side of the ball. We talked about the quarterbacks. We talked about one of the lesser positions in the draft, but always interesting. Let's talk now about the defensive linemen, the edge rushers, the defensive tackles and noses that are going to be in there. Nate, start us off. Let us know, as a whole, what did you see out of this class?
There's a lot of explosion. These guys are explosive off the ball, a lot of pass rush ability, especially off the edge, a lot of speed coming around the edge. A lot of big guys. There's a lot of defensive tackles that we found that they're more these one gappers. They're getting up the field. They're rushing the passer. Not so many guys that are playing the run. Obviously, some of these guys can do both. But these guys are very explosive and can really rush the passer.
Yep, you get paid to rush the passer in the NFL these days. First step explosion is one of our critical factors that we judge for defensive tackles and for edge rushers. And I love that you came out with that word right away, that explosiveness. And I think when we talk about explosiveness, we got to talk about our number one player on our entire draft board this year. John Todd did the evaluation, but we've both watched a bunch of his film. Quinnen Williams, where do you start with him?
Obviously, the explosion. It's ridiculous how quick he comes off the ball. He's almost always the first person off the ball. He's almost through the offensive line before the offensive line is even ready. He shows just rare body control. One of the few 9s that we gave this year. 9 is rare. If you look at him, he's coming through the line. Offensive linemen are trying to down block on him. He doesn't even move. His body control and his core, incredibly strong, flies right through. It's like no one even touched him. But he's strong against the run and the pass. One of those guys that, he can play both, strong at the point of attack. He's a one-gapper all day. He played a lot of nose for Alabama, but just put him in there at 3 technique, let him rush the passer, get up the field, and I think he's going to wreak havoc early on in his career. Yeah, you got a guy here, flexibility. He can play in the 1 or in the 3 probably. Absolutely. So just a couple of really great stats that we pulled on Quinnen Williams just to show you how crazy his season was. So as a pass rusher, his hurry rate was 13.8%. That dwarfed the second highest figure, San Jose State's Boogie Roberts, in a little bit different quality of competition, by 2.8 percentage points. To give you an idea, his hurry rate actually outpassed several edge rushers who we'll talk about today, including Ferrell, Brian Burns, Montez Sweat, and Rashawn Gary. So from the defensive tackle position, he is doing Aaron Donald-like things in terms of not necessarily the style of player that he is. We'll talk about somebody else in terms of the play style being similar to Aaron Donald. But in terms of the impact that he had an impact on college football that is similar to the impact that Aaron Donald had in the pro game. So impressive stuff there. And in the run game, he's awesome too. First in run stuff rate, which is solo tackles for non-positive yardage, either no gain or negative yardage. Among 339 defensive tackles with at least 100 run snaps, his rate of 6.8% was a full percentage point higher than the next best interior player. Again, somebody with a different quality of competition, South Alabama's Tyree Turner. So
just really ridiculous statistical season from Quinnen Williams, who came out of nowhere this year. How is that possible, Nate, that this guy was somebody that wasn't on the radar at Alabama and is absolutely he's number one on our board?
If you look at Alabama every single season seems to always have these guys that they only play 1 or 2 years because of the talent that they produce. It seems like every year they're always producing talent. So these guys can only get on the field, 1 or 2 years and they're into their career. But if you look at Quinnen Williams, yeah, he wasn't able to play last year. He was a redshirt freshman last year. So he could have played 3 years for Alabama if he really needed to, decided to come out this year. And if you look at our grades, there's a good reason why.
All right, awesome stuff. No combination of Quinnen Williams is complete without some discussion of Ed Oliver. So Ed Oliver is a guy who's been tumbling down some draft boards lately. I think coming into the season, people had him the consensus top guy along with Nick Bosa. And yours truly wrote the report on Ed Oliver. I really like this player. I see a lot of special traits there. It'll be interesting to see because we don't know until we get to the combine exactly what his weight is. But as I watched Aaron Donald coming out, it's not somebody I'm very open to comparing other players to because you don't see a lot of players that actually are accurate to compare to Aaron Donald in certain ways. And I don't think Ed Oliver is, to predict that he'll be the player that Aaron Donald is now, it would be, like predicting a meteor shower tonight. But what he is somebody who has those special traits. So we saw Aaron Donald come out at the combine and run just a ridiculous 40 time that we hadn't seen defensive linemen run before. Ed Oliver is going to do something like that. This guy's get off is something special. It's something that you don't see very often. And like we talked about before, get off is what I start with. First step explosion. When I'm grading any sort of defensive player, if you want to make an impact in the pass game or the run game, you got to get off the ball and either get into somebody if you're playing in a 2-gap scheme or get through a gap if you're playing in a one gap scheme. Ed Oliver is not a 2-gapper. This is not a scheme versatile player that we're going to be lining up as a true nose, zero technique, anything like that. This guy is a 3 technique. He's a Warren Sapp. He's an Aaron Donald. He's get him in an underfront. He needs to be utilized in an underfront, which could be odd or even these days, the way teams like to run a lot of their 30s. But he's got to be in a situation where you can get him isolated against an offensive guard one-on-one in pass rush situations because he will be a nightmare. And he's the sort of guy that I think you can build your defensive scheme around isolating that one-on-one matchup as a pass rusher and wreaking havoc in the backfield. I really liked his film. I thought that Quinnen Williams, when I watched him, he does things that he checks all the boxes, again, in a way that Ed Oliver doesn't, similar to when we were talking about the quarterbacks. And I think even in terms of some of the things that Ed Oliver does well, Quinnen Williams does those things really well too. That said, I would love Ed Oliver in the top 10. I think if I'm almost any team in this draft, I think he's going to be a heck of a player. Aaron Donald had a lot of questions when he was coming out, dropped to the teens because of the arm length. Everybody talked about the height and the arm length. And I wish I gave him a higher grade than I did going back. I gave him a very good grade, but there's no grade high enough to give Aaron Donald in retrospect. And everybody knocked him for that arm length coming out, even with the explosion and the get off. I think in today's NFL, that sort of quickness on the interior makes Ed Oliver a really special player. And can we get out of here with the stupid jokes about him playing linebacker? I'm assuming those are all jokes. He's not playing linebacker.
I don't know. Those reports are out there. It's possible. So
all right, let's talk about another guy. Our third-ranked player. We had Quinnen Williams at a 7.4 overall grade. That's a blue chipper. We had Ed Oliver at a 7.1 overall grade. That easily put him in our top 10 and our top 5 of graded players overall. Jeffrey Simmons was our third-graded defensive tackle /5 technique. So we're looking at 3 and 5 technique players. He graded in at a 6.9, which is a high to mid-first round grade. But that is going to be one of the perilous things about coming out with a rookie preview book so early. We did this pre-combine, and we did this pre-combine for a couple of reasons. One, we didn't want it to be kind of clouded with all of that information that comes out at the combine. We didn't want this to be about who looks the best running in shorts and what the Kuipers think of the world and all this stuff like this. We wanted this to be based on our evaluations. As I mentioned in the introduction to the book, every year in New Orleans, we would joke in February when we looked at our board that take a picture of it now because we're just going to ruin it from here on out. And it's true. We're going to incorporate all this combine stuff. We're going to incorporate all the medical stuff. We're going to have coaches come in with their different agendas of players that they want to have, and we're going to see the board get all kind of fluctuated. This is the pure board right here. And yes, it would be more accurate if we could move Jeffrey Simmons down the board in terms of if we were predicting where these guys are going to get drafted. But this is not an exercise in prediction. This is an exercise in projecting who are going to be the best NFL players. So let's catch everybody up on Jeffrey Simmons, and then let's talk about the player a little bit because there's still a player there.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, there's so many questions right now revolving around him. He has some off-field concerns coming into Mississippi State, and that's kind of haunted him a little bit, especially now, that the draft is upon us. But the biggest thing is, just a few days ago, it came out that he tore his ACL during combine training. So it's very possible that, he was possibly a top 10 guy, top 15 guy. Maybe he falls now just because of that. That usually happens with most guys once the draft comes around. But that's definitely something that is going to be a concern now. But whenever you look on the field, he shows, top-end talent. He shows the strength and power at the point of attack that you want to see. He sheds offensive linemen really easily, and he can neutralize double teams. So he can one gap, he can two gap. He needs to improve his overall pass rush skill. Didn't show a ton of production there. But he's one of the guys that if you take him in the first round, even with the torn ACL, he's going to be a guy that's going to be a mainstay on your defensive line for years to come.
Yeah, not a big finisher from a statistical standpoint, just a 7.5 career sacks, but 29 career tackles for loss, over 20 hurries in each of the last 2 seasons. It's not like we're talking about somebody who's been invisible as a pass rusher, but certainly there are other calling cards to his game in terms of his versatility and his play strength. My favorite line in the strengths from John Todd's report on the player, he said, easy strength and power. And what he's referring to there is it's one thing when you see somebody and you see him play with strength and you see him play with power, but when you see them do it with a level of ease, it speaks to their consistency. It speaks to how naturally this comes to them. And it kind of speaks to if they're maxed out on this skill and they're showing you the best of what they have, or if they're showing you the ability to do it with ease. I mean, it's Steph Curry shooting 3-pointers. It's that ease of the approach that you can just see that they're not laboring when they do it. I think when you watch Jeffrey Simmons as a player, you see just an NFL talented defensive lineman. He's just got that born gift that it's the reason why we pump defensive linemen up our draft board, because there are not a lot of guys that are damn near 300 pounds and can move like that. And this is one of these special people. The fluidity, the easy strength and power. I love that by John Todd. And I hope this player, despite, he'll have the blue sticker on him for character, he'll have the red sticker on him for the injury, but I hope he can persevere through these things. It'll certainly cost his draft stock a little bit, but that shouldn't be a knock on his career at all. We've seen Lyle Collins fall a lot farther, and that hasn't been a problem in his career.
Absolutely. And you look at Jalen Smith, too. He's a guy that got hurt and was going to be a top 5 pick, and he fell to the second round. He's going to get himself a nice second contract as well.
Absolutely. Last up for the defensive tackles, we got to talk about the teammates. We got a nose and we got a 3. We got Dexter Lawrence and we got Christian Wilkins. What do we think about these Clemson guys?
When you watch Clemson, obviously defensive front, that's the name of the game with Clemson. Dexter Lawrence is a guy that I really liked. I watched him. There's obviously questions around him with the suspension. Didn't play the last 2 games for the playoff. But the only real question I have for him is his endurance. It doesn't seem like he can stay on the field for longer than 2 or 3 plays. But looking at the positives, very good play strength, body control, heavy hands at the point of attack. He's scheme versatile. He can play anywhere from 0 to 5. Played pretty much anywhere at Clemson, depending on what front and what situation they were in. But if you put him at nose tackle at the next level, he's really going to be a guy that is going to wreak some havoc inside. And then whenever you go to Christian Wilkins, his teammate, he's one of the fun guys on and off the field, one of the guys that likes to be in the spotlight. But you look at his athleticism, he's disruptive in the running and the passing game. Most of his work comes as a one-gapper, not really as much of a two-gapper. He'll get caught up in some double teams every once in a while. Tends to disappear at times, which is easy to do with Clemson guys, because obviously if one guy disappears, one of these other guys is probably stepping up. But he's one guy that if you take him in the first round, you're going to be happy.
Yeah, overall, I would say watching the Clemson defensive line, the way it was talked about coming into the year, I was expecting to see something that was going to blow me away more, and it wasn't. And I think that's why when we look at the projections, there's a reason why Quinnen Williams and Ed Oliver and Nick Bosa and Josh Allen, that these guys should go off the board before these Clemson guys. That said, there's quality depth here, and we've got very good grades on these players. because there's a lot to work with. Wilkins was the guy that I was expecting to like a little more. He was fun. I remember seeing him on film last year and seeing him do some disruptive things that kind of got me excited as a player. I actually ended up coming away liking Lawrence a little bit better. That might be a reflection of the games that I saw him play in. For Lawrence, I'm not discussing who I think he is as a player. I don't think he plays a similar style to Ndamukong Suh. Do you remember Atavia Rubin?
Yeah.
He reminds me of that style player a little bit more, a guy that when you put him on the nose or in the one, he can really be somebody that's just a load to handle. But at the same time, somebody that there was inconsistency on third down. And somebody, so what I do compare him to with Ndamukong Suh is what we saw Suh throughout the season. We saw a lot of the year in Los Angeles. You hardly knew that he was on the field. Aaron Donald was killing people, and Suh was not needed maybe, but largely invisible a lot of the time, kind of hot and cold effort. And we've seen that for years with him in Detroit and in Miami. And I think that's the risk that you see with Lawrence, is that you might not get that consistent effort. Now, the upside that you see with Lawrence is they don't make people that big and that athletic. It's just scary what he can do. The fact that you would want somebody that's 350 pounds to be on the field on third down because of what they can do in the interior push in the pocket. So just like Ndamukong Suh throughout the season, you might grow tired of him. In the playoffs, Ndamukong Suh made a huge difference for the Los Angeles Rams because he showed up those games. And so in the games when Dexter Lawrence shows up, it's kind of a watch-out situation. So, guys that have come out in the past few years like that, Rasheed Hegeman, I remember, was a guy who all kinds of physical talent. Nobody wanted to mess with him at the Senior Bowl, but you also saw him getting tired in one-on-one drills and stuff like that down there. And you said, man, if this guy gets it together, there's nobody that's more physically talented. There's nobody that has higher upside than this. But then you're dealing with a character thing that we need the area scouts. We got to rely on the area scouts in those cases, the guys that are going into the schools and get to know these players over the course of years and know what their coaches really think of them to answer those questions. So where these guys actually land in the draft, I think will tell you a lot about how those sorts of questions were answered at the schools. All right, let's move to the edge. Talk about the group in general. What do we think of the edge overall this year?
Yeah, there's a lot of speed coming around the edge. A lot of guys that really show that they can rush the passer, kind of what I mentioned earlier. A lot of explosiveness coming off. And there's just a lot of talent at the top of the draft here. I think when you look at the first round, once the draft is over, you're going to see tons of edge guys coming off the board. It's one that's you're going to get a lot of good talent out of this year.
No doubt about it. Top guy on the edge list for sure is Nick Bosa. He's been the top guy on the list from before the season. Didn't do much this season to earn that status, but certainly has done a lot over the – actually, I'll take that back. In the couple of games that he did play this year, he was an absolute monster. I wrote the report on him, and it was hard to believe that somebody could be so impactful. And I said it was against like Oregon State and whoever else. But Nick Bosa, when I watched him, I saw Joey Bosa. I don't want to make I was criticizing lazy comps earlier, but when you watch this player, you see a guy with a really refined football game that's years ahead of where he should be in his development, and it's very hard to poke a hole. He's kind of one of these guys that I don't see the upside that I saw with Quinnen Williams. When I graded the players, I actually graded Ed Oliver just a tick higher than I graded Nick Bosa. Now, they're both at the 7.0 and above level. I had a 7.0 on Bosa and a 7.1 on Oliver. But the reason for me that Bosa didn't warrant a higher grade than that, that the really outrageous, like the 7.4 grade that we had on Quinnen Williams, was I didn't see anything that totally jumped off the film that said this guy is going to absolutely be somebody that is havoc all the time. I see him as being what his brother is, which is a very good NFL pass rusher, but I don't think that we can put him in the same conversation as Von Miller or somebody like that. And I think that's what I reserve these sort of high 7 grades for, is the people that are not just special compared to the guys in their class, but that are special compared to all of the guys in the NFL, including the Pro Bowlers. Now, that said, I gave him that Pro Bowl grade, and the biggest reason I gave him the Pro Bowl grade, he's very good at everything. We say that 6, Nate mentioned before, 6 is the line. 6 is a good grade. That means you're good at a trait. That means you win most of your battles against NFL players, and we build a team full of 6s. That means we're going to compete for a Super Bowl. Bosa's a 7 across the board. His explosions is 7. His pass rush ability is a 7. In the run game, he's a 7. The only things that he's not a 7 on are things like his hand use, which is just beyond his years, his repertoire as a pass rusher. He's got moves for days and counters on counters. So all those things that are, he'll be the easiest player to coach probably that has ever come into the league. So assuming that the health is there, very good player. I got no holes to poke in him. I think he'd be very good. I don't think you could go wrong taking him number 1 overall, number 5 overall, number 10 overall. And I think at the end of the day, he probably will go number 1 overall because he's the safest player, except for the injury stuff. As long as that's sorted out, he's the safest player, I think, in the draft. And I think that people will draft for that safety. And I think he's, at the end of the day, he's as good as or better than his brother, which is saying a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Just watching him the little bit that I did this year and last year, I thought the same thing. When you looked at their defensive line, the one guy that stood out was Nick Bosa. So I think when he comes in, if everything checks off with his injury, I think he's going to be one of the top guys in this class.
Yep. So he is our top-rated defensive lineman. Last line of my report was the best comparison for Nick is his brother Joey, and if he can stay healthy, he has a chance to make an even larger and faster impact in the NFL. So exciting player there. But let's talk about after Nick Bosa, who are the other guys that we need to dive into?
Well, the next 2 guys, that's Montez Sweat and Josh Allen. I was really excited going down to the Senior Bowl to see both of those guys compete against each other. And then Josh Allen dropped out. So that was a little bit upsetting. But Montez Sweat came away as one of the top names, the top performers down at the Senior Bowl. Really played well. So I think he's going to be solid at the top of the board. And Josh Allen's the guy that I've always liked. I did his report. He's one of those guys that he can rush, from a 2-point stance to 3-point stance. He's incredibly explosive off the ball. Uses a variety of moves. He likes the bull rush. He can push, pull. He can rip. Do a little bit of everything there. He uses his explosion and his bend to win around the edge. So he's not the fastest guy, but he's explosive off the ball, and he just wins with that around the edge. A guy that I see whenever I watch Josh Allen is a little bit of Justin Houston. He can play against the pass and the run. Really good setting the edge against the point of attack, against the run. But I'd like to see him convert a little bit more around the line of scrimmage, let some tackle opportunities slip through. But other than that, if you took him number 2, you took him number 5, I think it's not an issue there. He's going to be solid.
Yeah, we ended up on our rankings just giving Montez Sweat the edge over Josh Allen. I'll say on my personal rankings, I love me some Josh Allen. And I'm talking about, of course, the edge rusher from Kentucky. He really jumps off the page when you look at a lot of our advanced stats this year. And I tend to think on the defensive end especially, we've got some really good stats when it comes to the pass rush and what guys can do there. 17 sacks in 2018, 31 in his career, 43 hurries this year, 30 hits, 10 knockdowns for 67 total pressures. Really impressive stuff. Also kind of up there in terms of tackle share, which is something that we look at for defensive players. What percentage of your team's tackles are you making? That's a really good sign of your productivity as a tackler. And in addition to that, he dropped into coverage some this year too, and he showed the ability to do that. So really, really productive as a pass rusher, even though he's only rushing about 60% of the time on pass plays. So I think you see a versatility to use this guy well. I think you see, like you said, run game and pass game, a really strong player, both sides of the ball. And at the end of the day, it's the pass rush. It's the pass rush. And it's funny, I was going to ask, who does he remind you of? And I was going to mention Justin Houston and Dee Ford, and you went for the Justin Houston comp before that. Because I think he's I think you're spot on with that comparison, and I think that's very much what his upside looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's one of the guys that he was on my board last year, and he's one of the guys I wanted to watch throughout this season. And I think he's one that is really going to come in and make an impact early on. All
right, let's talk about a guy who I am not as high on. A guy that we watched in scout school, actually, when we were calibrating all of our grades and looking at kind of what we look for in edge rushers.
Yeah, let's talk about Clelin Ferrell a little bit. Another one of those Clemson guys. He's one of those guys that he can run a little hot and cold. So that might be alluding to a little bit of what you're talking about.
Let's take a step back. Adonis body type. Body type, 6'4", 265. Looks the part of what you want at this position. I mean, I couldn't imagine going to the school and saying, if you drew what you want an edge rusher to look like, you would draw Clelin Ferrell.
Yeah, for sure. You look at him; he's the type that you want to see.
Let's talk about other good things. The get off.
The get off is ridiculous. Whenever we're watching him, you can see that he's one of the Clemson guys that he's like the fastest guy off the ball. Something that we were talking about with Quinnen earlier. He's one of the guys that's always off the ball first, all the way, almost always through the offensive line.
I guarantee you, Cleveland Ferrell cannot shoot a basketball, because if he could shoot, he would not be playing this sport.
Correct.
His get off, I guarantee he would have the first hop, second hop, quicks, all that kind of stuff that basketball scouts look for. But lucky for us, I guarantee, there's no way he's got 15 feet of range. He probably looks like me out there.
No, he's going to make his money because of his get off, basically, at the NFL level. So,
that's upside. Get off is upside. I'm on board with that. So that's why I'm saying this at my peril, because I didn't like this player in terms of very hot and cold. Very hot and cold, not a well-developed game. And for a guy that's kind of been doing it, fourth-year junior, playing for this team at Clemson, having all the development that he's had, and being a better athlete than everybody that he's going against, for a guy not to stand out on film more kind of bothered me. It bothered me that this was maybe the fifth best player on the defense. Even if he's the best NFL prospect, which I don't think he is, he wasn't their best player on defense or even close to it. And it's one of those things, going back to when I was coaching in high school football, if I thought about how a college would want to have my crappy tight end because he's 6'4" and 250 and he runs fast and looks the part, even though I know he can't block and he can't catch. I get afraid of grading a player like a first round grade you want to use a first round draft pick, a top 15 pick on somebody that hasn't put it together as a football player yet. You might get 10 sacks out of him. So maybe I'm just being a little bit too conservative here, because you got to swing at some point and try to get somebody, and you don't find body types with explosion like this. At the same time, it scares me that he hasn't put it together as a player. I hear he's an All-American, but you don't tell, but based on the way that he plays necessarily. It's flashes. It's flashes, and then it goes away. So I hope I'm wrong. I hope that he does put it together, because the athleticism is scary and as good as anybody. But I wasn't shot in the ass with it.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's hot and cold. He shows some definite flashes, big time traits, but we'll see if he can put it together. All right.
We made it through the guys that we wanted to talk about. Any other points you wanted to tack on here at the end?
I don't think so. I appreciate you having me on. This was a great time. Good luck the rest of the way.
Hey, man, we'll be having you on plenty times more. Get to know Nate Cooper. He basically runs our scouting department at SIS. He's one of the top guys here in our football department, and we'll be lucky if he's not working for a team soon, but I wouldn't bet on that. Hopefully we can keep you. Well, we'll see. Hopefully is always in the eye of the beholder. But regardless, awesome talking about this today. Everybody, if you haven't done it yet, check out the SIS Football Rookie Handbook. You can read about it on our website, sportsinfosolutions.com. You can check us out on Twitter at sportsinfo_SIS. And as always, please like, rate, subscribe to the Off the Charts podcast. We'll see if we have Aaron, a different guest, or both back next week. Producer Justin will surprise us.